I never thought of myself as someone who'd catch the attention of a professor, especially not him. I mean, I'm just a regular guy. Average looks, quiet in class, not particularly brilliant. I sit in the back, take notes, try not to make eye contact. Nothing about me screams notice me. But somehow, he did. Professor Grant teaches American literature. He's in his mid-30s, I think. Young for a tenured professor. The kind of guy who wears button-down shirts with the sleeves rolled up and has this calm, thoughtful voice that somehow makes even the most boring poem feel like it's speaking directly to you. I swear, half the class is in love with him. Girls, guys, probably some faculty too. And I get it. He's got that quiet kind of charm that doesn't hit you all at once, but lingers, gets under your skin, makes you wonder about him. I didn't think I was obvious. I mean, I tried really hard not to be. I'd avoid looking at him too long, kept my questions to a minimum, made sure I was never the last one to leave class, but I'd watch him sometimes, the way he ran his hand through his hair when he was deep in thought, or how his jaw tightened just slightly when someone said something truly stupid. I noticed the details. I couldn't help it. There was this one lecture. I remember it because it was the first time he looked at me longer than a second. We were talking about Whitman, and he asked the class what they thought unspeakable visions of the individual meant. A few people gave half-baked answers, and then, without raising my hand or saying a word, he looked right at me. "Alex," he said. "My name." Just like that. "What about you?" I must have blinked 10 times. I didn't even know he knew who I was. I scrambled, my throat suddenly dry. Maybe that it's about the parts of ourselves we're scared to say out loud. Things we feel but don't really talk about. His eyes didn't leave mine. He nodded, slowly. "Yeah," he said, "that's exactly right." And then he moved on, just like that. But I sat there, frozen, like my body didn't get the memo that it was time to keep pretending to be invisible. From that day, something shifted. Not in a dramatic way, nothing anyone else would notice. But I did. The way his eyes lingered just a second longer when I spoke. The faint smile when I entered the room. The way he once held the door open for me, even though he didn't have to, and said my name again, this time a little softer. Like it wasn't just something on a roster, but something he liked the sound of. I told myself I was imagining it. That professors don't notice students like that. That even if he was gay, which was a big if, it wouldn't mean anything. But then came office hours. I went in to ask about a paper. At least, that's what I told myself. The truth is, I just wanted to be in the same room with him, without 30 other people around, to see if the tension I thought I felt in class was real or just a product of my overactive imagination. His office was small, books everywhere, half-drunk cups of coffee, a beat-up leather chair that looked way too comfortable. He greeted me with that calm smile and waved me in. We talked about the paper for maybe 5 minutes. Then he leaned back in his chair, looked at me, and said, "You write like someone who's afraid to say what they really mean." I blinked. "What do you mean?" "You're holding something back," he said, "like you're dancing around what you want to say instead of just saying it. It's good writing, but it's not honest yet." My stomach twisted. Because he wasn't just talking about my paper. He couldn't be. Right? And then he said something that changed everything. "It's okay, you know," he said. "Most people spend their whole lives trying not to be seen. But sometimes being seen is the first step." He didn't clarify. He didn't need to. I left that office with my heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. I walked across campus in a daze, the world a blur around me. I had no idea what had just happened, but I knew it wasn't nothing. And I knew this story, whatever it was just beginning. I couldn't stop thinking about what he said. It looped in my head, over and over. Being seen is the first step. Was it just about the paper? Was I projecting? Was there a hidden meaning? I second-guessed every word, every glance from class after that. It got to the point where I started dreading going to lecture. Not because I didn't want to see him, but because I wanted it too much. Every little interaction started to feel loaded, and I hated how much I was hoping. Then one afternoon, he sent out an email about a small, optional discussion group. Just a few students outside of class going deeper into some of the material. For those interested in writing more personally, he said. Of course I signed up. It was held in the English department lounge. Old couches, terrible fluorescent lighting, the faint smell of burnt coffee. There were only 4 of us. And he was different in that setting, more relaxed. He even laughed, this soft, genuine sound that I felt in my chest. He talked about writing from the body. The hardest thing, he said, is writing the truth when the truth is about you. Not the safe version, but the raw stuff. The parts you're not sure anyone wants to hear. His eyes flicked to me, just for a second. That night, I stayed after longer than I meant to. The other students filtered out one by one until it was just me and him. He was cleaning up coffee cups when I stood there awkwardly with my backpack slung over one shoulder. I liked what you said, I mumbled. About writing the stuff you're afraid to say, he nodded. That's the stuff that matters most. There was a long pause. My heart was beating in my ears. I've been afraid to say a lot of things, I said. He didn't say anything at first. Just set the cup down on the counter. Then he turned to face me fully. You want to sit? He asked, nodding toward the couch. I hesitated, but I sat. He sat beside me, not too close, but close enough that I could smell the faint scent of his cologne. Something warm and clean, like cedar and citrus. He didn't speak right away, and I was suddenly hyper-aware of how quiet it was, how close we were. I've read your work, he said finally. You're careful, you're good, but you're holding back. And I think it's because you're afraid of what people will think if they really saw you. I swallowed hard. Maybe. I'm not asking, he said gently. I know that feeling. His voice dropped slightly on that last sentence. Something in his tone shifted, like he wasn't just talking as a professor anymore. I looked over at him, and he was already looking at me. It wasn't a look you give a student. It wasn't curiosity or critique. It was closer to recognition, like he knew something about me. Like we shared something unspoken. My chest tightened. He leaned forward a little, his elbows resting on his knees. You're not invisible, Alex, he said. I couldn't breathe. Then he stood up. Come by my office tomorrow. I want to talk more about your writing, he said, his tone neutral again, professional. But his eyes lingered, just for a beat longer than necessary. Okay, I said. He walked past me and opened the door. And when I stepped out, I swear, I could still feel the heat of his gaze on my back. I didn't sleep that night. I laid in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything he said. Every word, every glance. That look when he told me I wasn't invisible. The way he sat forward, almost like he wanted to close the distance between us. I was spiraling, and I knew it. But I didn't care. Because deep down, some part of me didn't think I was imagining it anymore. The next day, I showed up outside his office 10 minutes early. I walked past the door 3 times before I actually knocked. When I finally worked up the nerve, he opened it immediately, like he'd been waiting. Come in, he said, voice calm as always. His office looked exactly the same. Books everywhere, one small window cracked open, the hum of campus traffic drifting in. He gestured for me to sit on the small couch near the door while he perched on the edge of his desk. You brought your writing? He asked. I nodded and handed over the printed pages. A personal essay I hadn't shown anyone before. It was messy, honest, raw in a way that made me sick to my stomach after I wrote it. I almost didn't bring it. He started reading, eyes scanning quietly, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched. I kept my hands in my lap to keep them from shaking. When he finally looked up, there was something different in his face. Not pity, not concern, something closer to admiration. "This is good," he said. "Really good." I swallowed. "Even the part about—" "Yes," he cut in, "especially that part." I looked down at my shoes. "I didn't think you'd—" "What? Be okay with it?" he asked, but his tone was gentle, not mocking. I guess I wasn't sure. He set the papers down beside him and leaned forward a bit, elbows on his knees again. The same posture as the night before. "You wrote about being afraid people would see you differently if they knew the truth," he said. "That you liked men, that you didn't know if it was okay to want something you couldn't name yet." I couldn't look at him. "It's okay," he added. "You don't need to say anything now." I finally raised my eyes. And he was watching me, not like a professor evaluating a student's work, but like a man trying to understand someone sitting right in front of him. "I'm not sure what I want," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I just know I feel something around you, and I don't know what to do with that." His expression shifted, not shocked, not even surprised. Just still, focused. "I need to be careful," he said slowly. "Because of the dynamic here. Because you're still in my class." My chest sank. I looked away. "But that doesn't mean I don't feel it too," he added, his voice quieter. My heart thudded. He stood, walked to the window, paused. I watched his back, his shoulders tense beneath his shirt. Then he turned around and looked at me. "There are rules," he said. "Lines I won't cross while you're my student." I nodded, barely trusting myself to speak. "But if those rules weren't there," he said, softer now, "this conversation might be very different." We stood in silence, everything unspoken pressing in from every corner of the room. Then he walked to the door, opened it. "For now," he said, "let's just focus on your writing." I stepped out into the hallway, feeling like gravity had changed somehow. I didn't know what this was between us, if it was just tension or something real. But I knew I wasn't imagining it anymore, and I had no idea what came next. The next few weeks were hell and heaven at the same time. I kept going to class like nothing had happened. I sat in my usual seat near the back, took notes, nodded when expected. But everything was different. Every time he looked at me, I felt it in my stomach. Every time he said my name during discussion, it rang louder in my ears than it should have. We didn't talk about it again. Not directly. But the tension was still there, woven into every passing glance, every half smile. And then he started leaving notes on my papers. Not the usual feedback, more personal. Once, after I turned in a revision of the same essay, he'd written at the bottom, "You're getting closer to the truth, keep going." Another time, this version felt more honest, felt more like you. It wasn't just about writing anymore. One afternoon, he sent me an email asking if I could come by during office hours again. Said he wanted to go over my midterm draft. Nothing unusual, at least on the surface. But when I walked into his office, he closed the door behind me again. And this time, he didn't sit on the desk. He sat beside me on the couch. "It's good," he said, holding the paper in his hand. "But it's safe again," I laughed nervously. "Guess I'm still holding back." He looked at me for a long time. "What are you afraid of, Alex?" I shrugged, but didn't say anything. He leaned back, letting the silence settle. The hum from the open window was the only sound between us. "You don't have to be afraid of me," he said finally. My chest tightened. "I'm not." He nodded slowly. "Okay." Another pause, this one longer. And then he did something unexpected. He set the paper aside, folded his hands in his lap, and said, "You ever notice how quiet it gets right before a storm?" I frowned, caught off guard. "What?" "Right before it rains," he said, his voice low. "There's this stillness, like the world is holding its breath. I didn't answer. I was too busy watching the way his jaw tensed slightly when he talked. He turned to look at me directly. That's what it feels like when I'm around you. There was a buzzing in my ears. My whole body felt electric. I shouldn't have said that, he added quickly. I know the rules. I'm not trying to cross any lines. You deserve to know that it's not one-sided. I swallowed hard. What does that mean, though? What are we even talking about? He ran a hand through his hair. It means I see you, and yeah, I feel it too. But I need you to know something. Until the semester ends, until you're no longer my student, I won't act on any of it. My throat felt dry. So we wait, he nodded. If you want to. If you don't, we let it go. I sat there, trying to process the weight of his words. And then, as if sensing I couldn't handle anymore, he stood and opened the door. This time, he didn't say anything as I walked past him. He just watched me with that same steady look, the one that said everything he couldn't say out loud. When I got outside, it had started to drizzle, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel confused. I felt certain. Something was coming. And this time, I wasn't going to run from it. The semester dragged and flew at the same time. I threw myself into schoolwork, partly to distract myself, partly because it felt like the only way to keep things from spilling over. I avoided his office. We stuck to brief conversations after class, the kind that felt completely normal on the surface, but were loaded with everything we weren't saying. I started counting down the weeks, then the days, then the hours, and finally, the semester ended. I turned in my final paper early, a long, messy, deeply personal essay I had almost deleted twice before clicking submit. He emailed back a few hours later, "Come by my office tomorrow, just you and me." That night, I didn't sleep. The next day, the halls were quiet. Finals week was over, and most students had already left for break. I found myself standing in front of his door again, heart pounding in my throat. He opened it before I knocked. "Hey," he said, his voice softer than usual. No tie. Sleeves rolled up. He looked tired, or maybe relieved. I stepped inside. He didn't sit at his desk this time. He stayed by the window, arms folded. I waited by the couch, backpack slung over one shoulder. "I read your paper," he said, without turning around. "Yeah?" He nodded. Twice. I didn't know what to say. I couldn't read his tone. "You wrote about wanting things you weren't allowed to want," he said. "About how exhausting it is to second-guess every look, every feeling. About how sometimes the hardest part isn't being rejected, it's being seen." I swallowed, hard. "Yeah." He finally turned around. "And you wrote about me." I froze. "I didn't say your name." "You didn't have to," he said gently. A long pause stretched between us. "I meant it," I said quietly. "All of it." He nodded, stepping forward a little, the way you do when you're not sure if you're allowed to cross a line anymore. "You're not my student anymore," he said, "so I'm not going to pretend like I don't feel something. I do." I felt my heart kick against my ribs. He kept his distance, hands in his pockets. "But this doesn't have to be anything. You don't owe me anything. If it was just tension, just curiosity, that's okay. I needed you to know." I didn't even realize I was moving until I was closer. 2 steps. Then 3. "I don't want it to be just tension," I said. His eyes searched mine. "Are you sure?" I nodded. And then, finally, the space between us disappeared. It wasn't dramatic. No movie-style kiss, just the soft brush of a hand, his fingers grazing my wrist, tentative, like he was still afraid I'd flinch. I didn't. I let him touch me, let the moment hang there, unspoken and electric, until we both exhaled at the same time. He leaned in, slow, careful, and I met him halfway. It was gentle, familiar and terrifying, a kiss that felt like something unfolding, not exploding, like pages being turned instead of ripped apart. He pulled back first, like he wanted to make sure I was still breathing. I was. Barely. "This okay?" he asked. I nodded, already leaning in again. After that day, things didn't suddenly become easy. It wasn't like we walked out of that office and straight into some perfect version of whatever we were trying to be. We had to figure it out. Slowly, carefully, like we were still learning the language for it. We agreed to take things one step at a time. Not because we were unsure of how we felt, but because what we had already meant something, and neither of us wanted to mess it up by rushing. The first time we met outside of campus, it wasn't a date, at least not officially. He invited me to this indie bookstore downtown. Said they had an old poetry section that reminded him of college. I showed up way too early, paced around the block twice, and nearly bailed. But when he walked in jeans and a worn hoodie instead of a button-up, something settled in my chest, like this was him. The version of him I'd only imagined when I watched him in class. We didn't talk about the kiss. Not right away. Instead, we talked about books, about how he ended up teaching, about why I started writing in the first place. He listened like no one ever had, like he wanted to hear the things I was afraid to say out loud. And I realized something that day. He hadn't just seen me, he understood me. After that, we started meeting more. Coffee shops. Walks around campus after sunset. Always a little outside the lines. Always careful, but real. The second kiss happened on a bench behind the library. Of all places. It was late, freezing, and we were both bundled up like idiots. I made some dumb joke about how cold my hands were, and he took one of them in his, rubbed it between his palms like it was the most natural thing in the world. Then he looked at me, and I just leaned in. That time, we didn't stop after one kiss. That winter break, I stayed in the city. He was around too, grading finals, working on some research. I'd text him in the mornings, usually just a simple, "good luck today," and he'd respond with a photo of his coffee mug and some quiet reply that always made my chest warm. Eventually, we stopped pretending we weren't together. Quietly, without any big declarations, we started acting like what we were was real. The first time he invited me over, I was nervous. Not because I didn't want to be there, but because it felt like crossing into a new chapter. His apartment was tidy but lived in. Books everywhere, a couple plants I could tell were fighting for their lives. It looked exactly how I imagined it would. He cooked. I offered to help. We ended up bumping into each other in the small kitchen so many times that he eventually just kissed me to shut me up. That night, we didn't sleep together. We just fell asleep on the couch, legs tangled, some old jazz record playing in the background. It was quiet, comfortable, the kind of silence that doesn't need to be filled. Eventually, I told my friends, then my sister. The world didn't end. No one cared that he'd once been my professor, because he wasn't anymore. Now, he was just the guy the first was seeing. The guy who kept extra creamer in the fridge because he remembered how I liked my coffee. The guy who'd once said, "You're not invisible," and actually meant it. One night, months later, I found the old essay I wrote, the one that started everything. I showed it to him again. He read it, smiled, and said, "It's still honest." Then he pulled me close and added, "But now you're writing a new one." I nodded. Because he was right. This story wasn't just about fear or tension or the lines we didn't cross. It was about what came after. And for once, I wasn't afraid to be seen.